Sometimes a game is just a game, but sometimes if you do a little digging, you might find that everything isn't quite what it seems. Maybe your favorite game has a hidden message or some horrible dark secret. Nintendo fans are some of the most obsessive gamers out there, so it's no surprise that they've noticed things about Nintendo games that the rest of us have missed. Let's dive in and take a look at some of these crazy theories Nintendo fans have concocted over the years. Be sure to let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all the latest content from the gamer. The characters in Super Smash Bros. Are toys. The Super Smash Bros. Series has been kicking around since 1999, when the original game launched on Nintendo 64. These games take characters from the whole spectrum of the Nintendo franchise and drop them into a Royal Rumble-style brawls, where the winner naturally takes all. There's nowhere else that you can find Princess Peach knocking the snot out of Ness from Earthbound, or Donkey Kong getting drop-kicked by Kirby. But wait a minute. Nintendo games are supposed to be family-friendly, right? So why are all these characters trying to slap each other silly? According to one theory, they're not. In fact, they're not the actual Nintendo characters at all. In the reality of the Smash Bros. Games, this theory suggests that they're just toys that look like the characters. Now, you might want to dismiss this idea simply because they look like the real characters in the game. That's true enough. But former Nintendo president Satoru Iwata gave credence to this theory in an interview with Time magazine. He said, "The Smash Bros. Games do not represent the Nintendo characters fighting against one another. They actually represent toys of Nintendo characters getting into an imaginary battle amongst themselves." He said when they were making the game, the company had a debate as to whether it was okay for the beloved Nintendo characters to pound on each other and decided it would seem wrong. That's why the opening of the first game in the series shows a hand take a Yoshi toy from a box, set it on a desk, and then bring it to life. Neat, right? Street Fighter's M. Bison is actually Mario. Nintendo fans know that the Mario games take place in the Mushroom Kingdom. It's a magical land of flying turtles and mushrooms that make you double in size. Fighting game fans know that Street Fighter has nothing to do with the Mushroom Kingdom. These games take place on Earth, with martial artists gathering from all corners of the world to compete in tournaments to see who's the best fighter. There's no obvious connection between Mario and Street Fighter, at least not on the surface. But if you dig a little deeper, you might start to see some similarities between Mario and the Street Fighter character M. Bison. Both wear red and blue outfits with nearly identical hats. The two characters share a similar moveset, complete with stomping attacks and flips. But there's more. No one knows what the M in M. Bison's name stands for, but it might as well be Mario. To top it off, the two game worlds have intersected before in the Super Smash Bros. Series. In the latest game, Ryu appears right alongside Mario. Both characters even have amiibo figurines, meaning Mario's just one step removed from M. Bison already. Think about it. Have you ever seen Mario and M. Bison in the same place at the same time? Didn't think so. No one has. That's because when Mario isn't saving Princess Peach from Bowser, he's busy traveling the real world to compete in fighting tournaments. It just goes to show. Don't mess with Mario. The Zelda Timeline. A boy dressed in green travels from towns to dungeons, fighting enemies, solving puzzles, and toppling enormous bosses along the way. Sometimes he collects the Triforce. Sometimes the biggest bad guy of them all is named Ganon, or some variation like Ganondorf. With The Legend of Zelda, Nintendo's been offering a fantastic adventures since 1986. A few of the games are directly related to one another, but most are standalone experiences that seem to be separate from all the ones that came before and after. Their game worlds are distinct, and even the art styles vary widely. It's not at all clear that they exist in the same universe, but some fans want to place all these different games in a unified timeline. To say it gets complicated is an understatement, especially considering that Link can travel through time in some of the games. But that hasn't stopped these dedicated Zelda fans from weaving elaborate stories to tie all of the games together. It all seemed like nonsense until Nintendo published the official Zelda timeline in an art book. According to Nintendo, the Zelda games do exist in a single universe, but in a very complicated timeline. The problems arise in Ocarina of Time, when our intrepid hero can be defeated or can win. If the hero is successful, another split enters the timeline, branching it into a child era and adult era. When you get down to it, it seems likely Nintendo didn't originally intend for the games to exist in a single timeline. But once fans latched onto the idea, the company made it work, more or less. This is one example of a fan theory coming true. Luigi dies during Luigi's Mansion. Nintendo games tend to be bright and cheery. You know, fun for the whole family. teens and tykes alike. The one Nintendo series that's not afraid to get spooky is Luigi's Mansion. These games center around Mario's taller, thinner brother as he busts ghosts in an enormous haunted house. The first Luigi's Mansion game came out as a launch title for GameCube in 2001. It started off with Luigi receiving a letter informing him that he won a mansion in a contest. He never entered such a contest, but he and Mario agreed to meet at the mansion to check it out. When Luigi arrived, Mario is nowhere to be found. Instead, he finds some menacing ghouls and meets a professor who's developed a vacuum-like ghost-busting device called the Poltergust 3000. The professor also said he saw Mario go into the mansion, but hasn't seen him come out. Cue the search for Mario, where Luigi explored the mansion's many rooms, fighting off the ghostly enemies that lie in wait. Here's where this theory kicks in. A lightning strike causes the mansion to lose electricity, making every room dark. A phone rings in the attic, so Luigi makes his way there and answers it. When he does, lightning flashes and you can see Luigi's shadow on the wall. Although Luigi seems to be standing on the floor, his shadow looks like it's hanging from the ceiling, as if by a rope around his neck. Now, if this theory is right, the living Luigi you control is just a fantasy. The real Luigi hung himself in the attic. Dark stuff. You're a killer in Pokemon Red and Blue. Released on Game Boy in 1996, Pokemon Red and Blue kicked off one of the biggest video game franchises around. As a simple role-playing game about collecting adorable creatures, it helped introduce a whole generation of gamers to the genre. It was an excellent game that was beloved by millions. But what if it's hiding a dark secret that only a few players figured out? What if the main character isn't the good-hearted kid he seems to be? That's the argument this theory makes. Here's how it goes. Your main rival in Pokemon Red and Blue is a trainer named Gary Oak. He always seems to be one step ahead of you on your journey, waiting for you to arrive in every new town. Whenever you meet, he challenges you to a Pokemon duel where your creatures battle his. Gary tends to use the same Pokemon each time you fight, including his Raticate. But after you battle him on a boat, you never see the Raticate again. What happened to Gary's Raticate? According to this theory, it dies as a result of the battle on the boat. The very next time you meet Gary is at the Pokemon Tower, a building that houses an enormous graveyard for Pokemon. Why would Gary be standing in a Pokemon graveyard right after his Raticate goes missing? Well, he's there to bury the poor creature that you offed, of course. It's dark stuff for a kid's game, but maybe that's why they don't come right out and say it. Super Mario Bros. 3 is a play. Super Mario Bros. 3 is one of the most beloved platformers of all time. When it debuted in America in 1990, it blew the minds of NES owners across the land with its dozens of levels and endlessly creative gameplay. It even holds up great today, unlike many other classics of the time. But what if none of it was real? Of course, it's a video game, so none of it actually is real. But we expect games to take themselves seriously and depict a fully imagined reality. According to this theory, the entire game of Super Mario Bros. 3 is nothing more than a stage play. Think about it. The title screen begins with a curtain opening, just like a play. Items in the environment cast shadows, as if stage lights are shining on them against the backdrop. Even the platforms look like they're bolted in place or suspended by ropes. It's a pretty convincing theory, and one that's hard to refute once you start looking at it that way. Believe it or not, series creator Shigeru Miyamoto seemed to confirm this rumor in a Twitter video. When someone asked if the game was all a performance, he nodded. Now that's not necessarily an official confirmation, but it's good enough for many of the fans who thought it was all an act this whole time. Kirby takes place after the apocalypse. Virtually no Nintendo franchise is more joyful than Kirby. After all, these games present hardly any challenge and sometimes seems like they're made for the youngest of young children. There's simply nothing dark or gloomy about them. Playing a Kirby game is about as gloomy as eating cotton candy at the fair. So there's no way that humanity is dead and gone in this game world, is there? Not so fast, Buster. The game that posed this question is Kirby 64: The Crystal Shards, which came out on Nintendo 64 back in 2000. It's a fairly standard Kirby game in that it lets you jump, fly, and suck up enemies to copy their special powers. You can even combine those powers to create more things for the pink hero to do. So why all this talk about the apocalypse? It's easy to overlook, but there's one particular world in the game called Shiver Star. From space, it looks like a standard everyday ice planet. But if you look closely as it spins around, you'll notice that it has continents shaped exactly like the continents on Earth. The levels on Shiver Star took place in environments like a frigid tundra and some kind of automated factory run by a giant robot. Did the robots kill off all the humans? Or did we kill ourselves off by mistreating the environment? To these questions, Kirby offers no answers. Perhaps it's better not to know. Donkey Kong Country is anti-American propaganda. Nintendo would have you believe that the Super Nintendo game Donkey Kong Country is about a gorilla trying to get his banana stash back from the bandits. The evidence seems to support this interpretation because that's exactly what happens on screen when you play. But what if Donkey Kong Country was trying to brainwash you into thinking that the United States of America was a very bad place? That's the theory anyway. According to people who believe it, the whole game was a metaphor for the Banana Wars, which took place in the early 1900s. During that time, the US was intervening with Caribbean nations to get an economic boost. As the name Banana Wars implies, those actions affected the banana business. If you look at the game with this theory in mind, Donkey Kong represents the besieged nations, and the villainous King K. Rool is America, coming in to take control of the banana trade. After all, the president at the time was Teddy Roosevelt, which kinda sounds like King K. Rool. This theory might be a stretch, especially considering the game was made many generations after the Banana Wars. But whether you believe it or not, you can see how the ideas make some kind of sense. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is about the stages of grief. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is the strangest Zelda game by far to date. Unlike the rest, which are standard adventures of good versus evil, this one is set up differently. It starts out with a giant human-faced moon looming in the sky. Turns out, the moon is on a crash course with the planet, and everyone's about to die. Only one hero can stop it, but he has to act fast because the crash is coming in 3 days. The game is so weird that it could all be a dream, which it basically is if you buy into this theory. Early on in Majora's Mask, you get knocked out by a dude named Skull Kid. If this theory is correct, the blow knocks you into a coma and the entire game is a dream that stems from your grief over the planet's imminent destruction. The first stage of grief is denial, which lines up with the first town you come to. Its citizens don't believe that the moon is heading straight towards the planet, even though it's obvious if you look up at the sky. The next town you come to involves a king who's angry about his kidnapped daughter. And wouldn't you know it, anger is the second stage of grief. These encounters go on until every last stage of grief is crossed off the list. It's possible that this is all just a coincidence, but it's also possible that the folks at Nintendo got sad and decided to make a game about grief. Little Mac is terminally ill in Punch-Out! If you thought that some of the other theories were a touch too dark, Nintendo isn't done with you yet. Just check out this off-the-wall theory about how Little Mac might be dying as he fights his way through Punch-Out! Punch-Out! And its sequels star Little Mac, a small, scrappy boxer who likes to punch above his weight class. We've all seen stories where the underdog succeeds against great odds, but watching Little Mac KO fighters like Bald Bull and Mike Tyson seems a little far-fetched. Maybe it is. If this theory is true, Little Mac has been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and the Punch-Out games represent his Make-A-Wish Foundation request to see what it's like to be a boxing champion. In this twisted take on the series, the boxers Little Mac fights with have agreed to throw their matches against this puny pugilist. To that end, they fight using predictable patterns that Little Mac can learn and exploit. Little Mac is 17 years old after all, so he's eligible to make a wish. The Foundation is famous for letting patients meet celebrities, and if you were interested in boxing when the first game came out, you'd definitely want to meet Mike Tyson. It might sound far-fetched, but face it, you probably can't think of a better explanation for Little Mac's dominance in the ring. So, what do you think of these wild Nintendo theories? Are they the ridiculous hallucinations of a clueless fanbase? Or are they the actual realities unearthed by dedicated video game archaeologists? Depending on the theories, it could go either way. We hope you enjoyed the video, so let us hear your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our great video content in the future.